It was so quiet that night, one investigator would later say, the fire sounded louder than her screams. A woman was stabbed in both eyes, locked inside her own car, and set on fire. She survived. But here's the question that haunted Akron, Ohio for nearly 40 years. What if the man who insisted he was innocent left DNA no one tested until 2023? This is a story about kidnapping, sexual assault, wrongful conviction claims, DNA evidence, forensic testing, survivor resilience, and justice delayed but not denied. And at the center of it all is not just a case file, but a woman. Before she was a crime statistic, Phyllis Cottle was a 44-year-old grandmother, a mother, a woman who liked routine. According to court records and later interviews archived in local reporting, she worked hard, showed up on time, and kept her circle small. Akron in 1984 was a city built on rubber and routine. You clocked in, you clocked out, you trusted the parking lot would be there tomorrow. Phyllis did everything right. She parked, she finished work, she walked to her car. What happened next would permanently alter the way Summit County talked about safety. According to trial transcripts and police reports, a man approached her vehicle. He forced entry at knife point. He drove her to an abandoned property. She was assaulted and beaten. She was returned to her car. Then came the act that shocked even veteran detectives. She was stabbed in both eyes, a deliberate act beyond what was required to commit the assault. Behavioral analysts call this overkill symbolic targeting. It often signals rage, domination, or an attempt to erase identity. She was left in the car. The car was set on fire. But Phyllis did something extraordinary. Blinded, burned, bleeding. She escaped. She stumbled into the night and found help. That survival changed everything. Police had a survivor. They had her testimony. But did they have the right man? Authorities arrested Samuel Herring, a local man with a criminal history. Court documents show he was identified through investigative leads and witness information developed in the days after the attack. He was convicted of kidnapping, rape, attempted murder. He received a life sentence. For decades, that appeared to be the end. But Herring never stopped claiming innocence. In 1984, forensic DNA testing did not exist as we know it. Evidence was preserved, but not analyzed using modern STR profiling. That detail, small at first, would later reopen everything. Forensic psychologists often differentiate between instrumental violence, crime for purpose, expressive violence, crime driven by emotion or identity domination. Stabbing someone in the eyes is not necessary to complete assault. It is personal. It is symbolic. It suggests a need to blind, silence, or permanently mark. That behavioral signature becomes important when assessing guilt claims. Years passed. Advocacy organizations, including the Ohio Innocence Project, began reviewing older convictions statewide. Herring petitioned for DNA testing. Evidence from Cottle's clothing, preserved for decades, was sent for modern analysis. Here is where transparency matters. For years, some observers wondered, was the identification reliable? Were 1980s investigative methods flawed? Could this be a wrongful conviction? These were legitimate questions. Justice systems improve precisely because they are questioned. In 2023, updated forensic testing was completed. According to reporting from the Marshall Project and regional investigative outlets, the DNA profile developed from preserved evidence matched Samuel Herring with astronomical statistical certainty, often described in prosecutorial briefings as a probability in the trillions against coincidence. That matters. because DNA, unlike eyewitness memory, does not fade. The result did not exonerate. It reinforced the conviction. The story does not end with a twist of innocence. It ends with confirmation. But confirmation does not erase the decades of uncertainty. Phyllis Cottle lived blind for the remainder of her life. She became an advocate for survivors and for individuals living with vision loss. She died in 2013. Her name sometimes gets lost in the debate about forensic testing. And that is something we must resist. True crime mysteries. The Shadow Lens made an investigative analysis of some gray areas of the conviction of Samuel Herring. Where was Samuel Herring at the time of the crime? What was his reported alibi on March 20, 1984? Documented account of Herring's claimed whereabouts. According to contemporaneous police records, later reported in detail by investigative outlets, Herring reported to police that on the afternoon of March 20, 1984, he slept in that day, watched television earlier in the afternoon, visited the parole office at approximately 3:45 p.m., went to the Howard Crane boxing gym where he was training for an upcoming fight. He said this was around 4 p.m. Prior to that, he said he had been given a ride by his brother from the parole office to the gym. Reportedly took a bus to the welfare office earlier, but found it closed. Police noted his cooperation, initially led them to rule him out as a suspect at first. Police timeline versus Herring's alibi. The attack occurred in the afternoon, around when Cottle was leaving work. His parole office visit and gym timeline pick up in mid-afternoon, but police did not corroborate his statements with timesheets, witness logs, or official records at the parole office or gym. No independent official documentation, employee time records, bus receipts, surveillance that confirmed his precise whereabouts during the critical attack window has been publicly released. Because of this, there is no confirmed time-stamped alibi in the public record. 2. What was his job profession in Akron at the time of the incident? Published sources do not document that Herring held a specific job or occupation immediately before the attack. Details from records and reporting show Herring had prior convictions and had recently been paroled in January 1984 after serving time for a shooting and aggravated burglary. There's no widely reported credible source stating that he held regular employment or a specific job in Akron at the time of the crime. The Marshall Project reporting from 2023 profiles him at age 67 in prison, without mention of pre-crime employment details. Right, in other words, the public record contains no documented job title or employer for him in 1984. 3. Why did police quickly focus on him as a suspect? Several factors from police investigation and trial records explain why Herring became a lead. A prior record and recent parole. Herring had a criminal history that included violent offenses and was on parole just months before the attack. This historically tends to draw investigative attention from police when a violent crime occurs nearby. B. Family connection to location. Investigators eventually identified the abandoned house where the attack occurred as owned by the Herring family. That geographic proximity strongly influenced suspicion once the location was connected to the crime. See witness and eyewitness leads. A bar manager and a patron later viewed suspect photos and said Herring's picture resembled a man they had seen that day. One detail involved whether he had a mustache or not. A cab driver's recollection also pointed to Herring as resembling an earlier rideshare passenger in the area on the day of the attack. D. Physical evidence used at trial, 1984 standards. At trial in the mid-1980s, prosecutors relied on what was then considered forensic evidence. Hair and fiber comparisons between Herring's jacket and items from the crime scene. Hair found on victim's bindings. Debris from the vacant location matching fibers from Herring's clothing, according to the criminalist presented at trial. A small amount of biological evidence that couldn't be fully tested at the time due to chemical contamination from substances used in the assault. These were considered significant at the time, but later critics have described them as weak by modern forensic standards. 4. Is there plausibility that he's innocent, especially since the victim was blinded and could not identify him? This is the core question that informed the Ohio Innocence Project's involvement and the decision to pursue modern DNA testing. Arguments supporting a plausibility of innocence. Eyewitness identification was weak or cross-racial. Modern innocence advocacy analysis has shown that cross-racial eyewitness identifications are particularly error-prone, and Herring's case involved such identification issues. B. The initial forensic evidence was weak. The original conviction was built largely on hair and fiber comparison, which modern forensic science regards as less reliable than DNA. C. Rush to arrest concerns. Advocacy attorneys noted that police may have moved quickly toward Herring once initial connections were made, without exhausting alternative leads. Those factors provide a plausibility of wrongful conviction in a general sense, which is why Innocence Project review was pursued. 5. What about the blindness of the victim and ability to identify? It's absolutely correct that Cottle could not have visually identified her attacker after the stabbing because her sight was permanently destroyed in the assault. Thus, the prosecution's case in 1984 did not rest on a post-attack visual identification by the victim herself. Instead, witnesses prior to the attack and investigative leads, photos from the bar, taxi recollection, played a role in shaping suspicion. This gap, no positive visual ID from the victim herself, was part of why some innocence advocates believed there was room to re-examine. 6. What did the new DNA testing show? In late 2023, after DNA testing of evidence from Cottle's clothing was completed, prosecutors confirmed that Herring's DNA profile was found on the crotch area of her pants and pantyhose recovered from the crime scene. This match was described as statistically so unlikely to be coincidental that the prosecutor called it a 1 in trillions likelihood of coming from someone else. Prosecutors characterized the result as the strongest possible DNA evidence supporting his conviction. 7. So does the DNA result refute innocence? From a forensic standpoint, DNA evidence of that strength on clothing directly associated with a sexual assault is regarded by courts and forensic science as extremely compelling evidence tying an individual to the assault itself. However, it is important to understand the limits of DNA evidence. DNA presence at a scene does not alone prove timing or sequence of events. The defense can still raise questions about secondary transfer or context, though statistically, these explanations are typically far weaker than direct presence. That said, at present, the strong scientific consensus in reporting is that the DNA result makes it far less plausible that someone else committed the crime. This case reveals 3 uncomfortable truths. 1. Evidence preservation matters. Without careful storage in 1984, 2023 testing would have been impossible. 2. Claims of innocence must be tested, not dismissed. Justice requires review. 3. Survivors carry the sentence long after court does. The criminal justice system is imperfect, but in this case, modern science affirmed the original verdict. That duality, doubt followed by confirmation, is rare in true crime. From a professional, investigative standpoint, the crime displayed personal overkill behavior. DNA tied the offender to biological evidence. No alternate suspect has been substantiated through forensic analysis. Objectively, the evidentiary standard supporting conviction is strong under modern forensic scrutiny. That does not minimize the trauma. It validates it. Imagine living the rest of your life without sight because someone chose domination over empathy. Imagine hearing the man convicted for your assault insist for decades that he was not there. And then imagine science quietly answering the question years later. There is no triumphant music here, only clarity. Cases like this force us to confront something uncomfortable. Not every mystery ends in exoneration. Not every doubt overturns a verdict. And not every monster disappears into myth. Some remain documented, tested, and confirmed. But here is the lingering question I leave with you. If DNA had not existed, would certainty ever have come? If stories like this matter to you, the careful, ethical, fact-driven kind, subscribe not because it's trending, but because truth deserves an audience. Share this with someone who believes justice should be examined, not assumed. And in the comments, what role should modern DNA testing play in reviewing decades-old convictions? Let's discuss respectfully. This story is reconstructed from court records, verified journalism, and documented forensic findings. Where commentary appears, it is clearly distinguished from fact. The intent is not spectacle but understanding. Because true crime, when done responsibly, is not about fear. It is about preparedness. It is about pattern recognition. It is about honoring victims. And tonight we remember Phyllis Cottle, not for how she was attacked, but for how she survived.